Even Occupy Democrats, they tweeted today that in Greece, the government is fining people $113 per month because they didn't take a product from a private criminal multinational organization. They're also bragging that in Austria, the government is fining people stealing $4,000 for them because they didn't take a product from a big pharma agency. This is also going to be happening in Quebec, and Occupy Democrats are asking, retweet if you want this to happen in the United States, which is absolutely ridiculous. They're on the side of literally forcing you through the threat of stealing your money or having guys show up with guns and use violence against you if you don't buy a product. This is where they're at. They're absolutely fascists, totalitarian, technocrats that have no respect for human decency or your personal property.
I have a tweet about this. So here we have the tweet. They say Greece announces that it'll begin fining the unvaccinated $113 per month. Austria announces that it'll begin fining them $4,000 a month. And Quebec announces it may begin slapping them with a significant fine. Retweet if you think America must do it. My response was no. We should just lock the unvaccinated people in jail. They can leave anytime as soon as they get the vaccine. This way, we aren't forcing them to get vaccinated, and we keep people safe.
Australia model.
I was concerned about that tweet because they're going to take your advice.
So I often tweet garbled nonsense, and I have no problem explaining why I do it. By tweeting the opposite in a slightly silly way, the average person of intelligence understands my point, and you can't take the tweet and assert context to it. So Luke posted a meme, and I'm like, I'm looking at this meme, and it's like, questioning, vaccines and things like that, or it's the science and the corporations around it. And I'm like, if you post that, they might say you're posting medical misinformation and ban you. So I posted it in a very silly way, criticizing it and pushing something that was absurd. So what are they going to do? They're going to ban me for saying it was crazy?
Yeah.
Even though most people understand my point.
My response to this tweet was replying to it with a gif of Mussolini giving a speech.
I saw that. That was awesome.
And I like that. That's also another way, just mocking these people because their ideas are absurd. And when we really break it down, what they're doing, they're calling for violent men with guns to come to people and steal their money for not taking a product. That's essentially what it boils down to. And
so let me just stress this point right now. And I'm going to say it again to make sure everyone hears it, because I really want the bread tubers to hear this. If we are talking about the French Revolution, and the right was, as you described, would say the aristocracy, and the left was the revolutionary. We sit before you today as humble civil libertarians and big L libertarians in a certain sense, saying the establishment politicians are corrupt and broken. The massive multinational corporations are criminal, and they are stripping the value and the rights of the working class in this country. We believe that there needs to be dramatic revolutionary change in this country, like ending the Federal Reserve.
Not depending on Chinese slave labor.
And not just ending the Fed. We would repeal it and then take control of the finances with our Congress.
Restoring the rights of the working class, ending the corrupt aristocracy and elitism in this nation, and letting good working class people have the fruits of their labor from the labor they produce. And many of you sit there and say it is good that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, corrupt neocon corporatists, neolib corporatists, are mandating the American people be forced to buy a product from a massive multinational corporation. You are the right in your own argument, and we are the left. We are to the left of you, and we're not even leftists. Now, if you want to talk about economic scale, when left means economic policy collectivism or right is laissez-faire, then we'll have an argument for sure. But if you want to play that game of left and right as tribes, y'all on BreadTube are actually right-wing for defending the government and the corporations as they do this. How does that happen? Isn't that weird?
They must have changed aisles there at some point. They all got up and shuffled over.
I think
that's why you got to not get too hung up on the definitions of the words rightist and leftist, because really, you can call yourself whatever you want, but if you're supporting multinational corporate takeover, that's authoritarian as hell, It's monarchist as hell.
Criminal entities with no liability for their product that's forced and extorted on the general public. That's a whole new level of
Literally
craziness.
Criminal.
That has a criminal past of buying off regulators, politicians, and doctors for pure profit motive that they had to pay billions of dollars in fines to.
Pfizer is like in the top 10 largest criminal cases in the world.
Yep.
I think Pfizer's like number 5 or
Yep.
6 or something.
For buying off regulators, scientists, and politicians.
You know, in practice, it's quite often difficult to see the difference between fascist regimes and communist regimes. And one technically is government ownership of the means of production. The other is government control of the means of production. But I've done a pretty deep dive on this. And if you look at Pol Pot, the mass murderer in Cambodia, and you look at many of his policies, not just economics, but civil liberties and general disdain for life, it's fairly difficult to tell the difference between him and Adolf Hitler. And yet we're taught that these guys are in opposite ends of the political spectrum. No, they're both murderous authoritarians. And mine's different than you. I put the bad guys on the bottom. I get the metaphor of putting us on the bottom, but as you move up my political scale, you get to all the things that are voluntary, cooperation and choice and informed consent, and all these crazy radical ideas that neither political establishment will tolerate today. And to me, it goes back to your manifesto that you laid out there. That's where we can find reasonable people, and it almost feels like it's in the middle, even though it's outside of the current structure altogether.
It's the people that spin around all through it and are willing to engage and understand all of it that seem like they're in the middle. It's happening so fast that it just looks like it's right there.
Yeah.
Those are the people I'm looking for.
Well, I think we found them tonight in the comments.
Yeah.
Or they're all saying we're foolish.
No, I think the people who watch tend to be fairly moderate. You know, nobody's an extremist in any sense. Maybe a few people pop in here and there. We get some leftists who just hate us and they're very authoritarian, tanky types. But for the most part, the people I meet on the street, regular people, and they're just, the response I usually get from people is they're like, I don't know, man. I just want to be able to live, to feed my family, to get by. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to cause problems. I just want things to get better, and I want people to chill out.
Yeah.
That's a lot of it. But you got a lot of people who are like, we want to go crazy. We want to go to war. We want dramatic revolutionary change by any means necessary. And, the one thing I find fascinating, because I've talked to a lot of Antifa people about this, I said, isn't the use of violence against someone inherently authoritarian? And they never have a real answer for it. You might get these sophists who are like, actually, the use of violence isn't because, and I'm like, what about beating someone until they agree with you is not authoritarian? Because isn't authoritarianism strict adherence to the authority or governance or politics based upon adherence to the authority? And the use of violence is authoritarian to force them to do it, whereas libertarian would be like sitting down over a cup of coffee and having a discussion and an argument and trying to convince them.
Persuasion.
Right.
Well, defensive violence, I guess, could be a libertarian thing.
We have this thing called the non-aggression principle that if you can't mess with somebody else, but if they mess with you, they threaten your life or your property, you have a right to defend yourself. But back to your point, I think this is super important. Antifa's model is explicitly violent. They're quite proud of it, and they think that violent change is the only way to sort of transform society, break the system. And all of these communist dictators tried this stuff, and they didn't give one damn about human life. Our strategy has to be different, fundamentally different. Ours has to be nonviolent, because violence is the ultimate violation of liberties and people's humanity. So I think there's power in nonviolence. And I'm a student of Martin Luther King and Gandhi, and I've studied these nonviolent movements, the solidarity movement. Who would have thought that a bunch of guys could gather and beat this all-powerful Soviet regime with nonviolence? They did it. So I think our tactics have to be different, and which is why I was so critical about January 6th. Aping the other guys is a losing strategy.
You're saying with the Soviet, is a piece, what was the party name you said that defied the Soviets?
Solidarity movement.
What was that?
Solidarność. It was a movement of union workers and people coming together throughout the factories that they were mandated to work at saying, no, we're going to protest. We're not going to work for the Soviet Empire. We're going to strike. And because of those strikes and that kind of collective bargaining power, it was one of the reasons out of many why the Soviet Empire kind of crumbled.
And for those
which
that
my
are-
family was a part of in Gdańsk, Poland.
And a little bit of trivia
Fist
for you
bump on
guys. For those that are fans of the game Civilization, in the video game Civilization 2, which is a very early version of it, you're creating a country. When you have civil unrest, it actually shows an image from the Solidarity movement. They're holding the big sign and protesting, and that's the symbol used in the game of unrest in your city.
Yeah.
Cool stuff, huh?
A lot of history there, and it shows you that protests throughout history sometimes do work. Now, there's a lot of pessimists that say protests never work, but I think it's worth a try, and I definitely agree with you. We should always strive to be nonviolent. We should also have the ability to defend ourselves if the need comes, but prioritize that nonviolence over anything else, because the state has mastered the tool of anger, of hatred, and of violence in such a way that there's no using it in any way that it doesn't benefit them directly.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.